Two sisters stood before the same king. One became queen and lost her head. The other vanished from court and lived. Anne Boleyn reached for a crown and paid with her life, but Mary Boleyn stepped away just before everything fell apart. That wasn't luck. So what did Mary see that Anne didn't? And did she survive because she was forgotten? Or because she understood Henry VIII better than anyone else? A bell tolls in the distance. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. London wakes to another morning in May, 1536. The Tower of London stands silent behind its walls. The crowd has already gone home. The scaffold has been cleared. Anne Boleyn is dead. But somewhere far from the tower, another sister still breathes. Mary Boleyn does not stand at a window waiting for news. She is not kneeling in prayer beside the queen. But she is not begging for mercy. She is gone. When the axe fell on Anne's neck, it did more than end a queen's life. It poisoned the Boleyn name. It turned ambition into shame. It made former friends step back in fear. And Mary understood that faster than anyone. Once, she had moved easily through the royal court. She had known its music, its laughter, its glittering gowns. Years earlier, before Anne had captured Henry's heart, Mary herself had drawn the king's attention. People whispered about it. Some called her foolish. Others called her clever. But whispers are dangerous things. And in 1536, whispers could kill. After Anne's arrest, Mary was not at court. She was already gone from that world. Married quietly to William Stafford, a man without title or fortune, she had stepped away from ambition long before the storm came. Many thought she was reckless for marrying him. He was not useful. He did not raise her family's power. He offered no royal advantage, but he offered something else: peace. When Anne rose high as queen, Mary faded into the background. And when Anne fell, that distance may have saved her life. The Boleyn name became toxic overnight. Men who once praised Anne now denied her. Courtiers who once smiled at the family avoided their gaze. Even loyalty became dangerous. Mary must have felt the shift. A family that had climbed so quickly had fallen just as fast. Their father lost favor. Their allies grew silent. The court that once felt like home became a place of quiet threats. So Mary stayed away. We do not have dramatic letters from her during this time. No public cries of grief, no bold defense of her sister. History gives us something colder: silence. But silence does not mean indifference. Imagine her hearing the news, perhaps in a countryside home, perhaps standing near a small window, the words reaching her slowly. Anne is gone, executed, accused of crimes that still echo with doubt. Mary knew the court. She knew how quickly affection could turn to suspicion. She had seen Henry's moods. She had felt his attention once. And she understood something many did not. The king's love was never safe. Once Mary herself had been close to Henry. Some believe she had been his mistress. Some believe she bore his child. It is impossible to know the full truth. But she had walked near the flame. And she had stepped back. When Anne chose to reach higher, to refuse Henry until he offered marriage, Mary had already learned the cost of being too close to power. Perhaps she saw the danger before her sister did. After Anne's execution, many expected the entire Boleyn family to suffer. That was often how Tudor politics worked. When one fell, others followed. But Mary remained untouched, not praised, not protected, just ignored. And in Tudor England, being ignored could be a blessing. She did not return to court. She did not try to restore her family's name. She did not seek revenge. She did not stand beside young Elizabeth, Anne's daughter, in public grief. Instead, she stayed in the countryside with her husband. It was a simple life compared to court. No grand feasts, no glittering halls, just land, children, and quiet days. Some might call it exile. Others might call it survival. We often imagine history as loud and dramatic. Crowns falling, swords flashing, queens kneeling. But Mary's story is different. It is a story of stepping away. After Anne's death, England moved on quickly. Henry married Jane Seymour within weeks. The court dressed again in new colors, music returned. Laughter echoed once more in palace halls, but the Boleyn name never fully recovered. Mary watched from a distance. Perhaps she felt grief, perhaps guilt, perhaps relief. Relief that she was not standing on that scaffold. Relief that she had chosen love over ambition when she married William Stafford. It is easy to judge her silence. Why did she not fight for her sister's memory? Why did she not demand justice? But we must remember the world she lived in. This was a kingdom where disagreement with the king could mean death, where loyalty was measured by obedience, where survival required careful steps. Mary had seen how quickly fortune could turn. She had seen her sister rise higher than any woman in England and then fall in a single morning. She chose something else. She chose to live. After 1536, she fades from official records. There are no grand portraits of her older years, no dramatic accounts of political power. She did not become a symbol. She became ordinary. And perhaps that is the deepest mystery. What really happened to Mary Boleyn after Anne's death? She did not become a legend. She did not die for love. She did not fight the king. She stayed away. She raised her children. She tended her home. She watched history from the edge instead of its center. In a world that rewarded boldness with glory and punished it with blood, Mary's quiet choice stands out. The bell that rang the morning Anne died eventually stopped. The crowd dispersed. The scaffold was taken apart. But Mary's silence continued. It stretched across years, across fields and seasons, across a life lived without headlines. Sometimes survival looks like courage. Sometimes it looks like retreat. And sometimes it looks like a sister who understood too well what happens to those who stay too close to a king. The bell fades. The countryside remains. And Mary Boleyn, once near the center of England's most dangerous court, becomes a shadow in history, alive, breathing, and gone from the stage. Not executed, not crowned, just surviving. And in Tudor England, that may have been the bravest choice of all. As a small wooden door closes behind her, not with force, not with anger, just a soft click. Mary Boleyn does not look back. The air in the countryside smells different from London. Cleaner, slower. No heavy perfume, no stone walls trapping whispers, only wind moving through tall grass. Years before her sister's execution, Mary had already made a choice that shocked her family. She married William Stafford, a man with no grand title, no royal blood, no promise of power. It was not a strategic marriage. It was not approved. It was love. In the Tudor court, love was rarely the reason for marriage. Marriages were built like bridges, to connect families, to raise status, to gain favor. But Mary stepped off that bridge, and when she did, she lost more than position. Her family was furious. The Boleyns had climbed carefully through ambition. Anne was rising. Henry's attention was focused. The future looked bright, dangerous, but bright. Mary's marriage threatened that image. William Stafford was a gentleman, but not powerful, not useful. He could not help the Boleyn name grow stronger. So Mary was quietly removed from court, not in chains, not in disgrace, but in silence. She was no longer invited to shine under palace lights, no longer dressed in fine silk before the king, no longer part of the careful game her family played. And yet, When Anne's world collapsed in 1536, Mary was not standing beside her. She was far away. Some historians believe this distance saved her life, because when Anne was arrested, anyone close to her became suspect. Friends were questioned. Servants were imprisoned. Even family members were watched closely. The Boleyn name became dangerous overnight. And Mary was no longer inside that circle. Imagine the tension of those weeks. News traveling slowly through the countryside, rumors turning into truth. Anne accused of betrayal, Anne locked in the Tower, Anne executed. Mary must have felt the weight of it. A sister, a queen, gone. And yet she did not ride to London. She did not appear at court to defend the family name. She stayed where she was, with William, with her children. It is easy to see this as weakness. But perhaps it was clarity. Mary had already seen what life at court required. Smiles that hid ambition, conversations filled with caution, every word measured, every glance watched. The court was not a home, it was a stage, and Mary had stepped off it. William Stafford was not a powerful man, but he offered stability, land, a quiet existence, a life built on something softer than ambition. We do not have long love letters between them, no dramatic confessions, but the fact that Mary chose him, knowing it would cost her status, tells us something. She valued something different. After Anne's execution, Henry married Jane Seymour quickly. The court shifted again. New alliances formed. Old names faded. Mary's name did not return to the spotlight. She was not punished, but she was not restored either. She became a gentlewoman in the countryside, watching England change from a distance. She saw Henry grow heavier, harder, more suspicious. She saw her niece, Elizabeth, grow up without her mother. Perhaps she wondered what might have been different, on if Anne had chosen safety instead of power, if the Boleyn family had been less ambitious, if love had been enough. But Tudor England did not reward gentle choices. Mary's marriage to William had been seen as foolish, a step down, a waste of opportunity. Yet in the end, it may have been her salvation. She did not lose her head. She did not kneel at a scaffold. She did not hear the crowd whispering her name. Instead, she heard the wind outside her window, the laughter of children, the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. That ordinary life would have felt small compared to courtly splendor. No golden halls, no musicians, no royal attention, but also no executioner. There is something deeply human about that trade. Mary gave up greatness. She gave up history's spotlight. She gave up the dangerous closeness of a king. And she lived. When we ask what really happened to Mary Boleyn after Anne's death, the answer is not dramatic. She did not plot revenge. She did not return to power. She did not reclaim the Boleyn name. She stayed hidden. She chose love over ambition. She chose survival over legend. In a world that rewarded boldness with crowns and punished it with death, Mary made a quieter choice. The door she closed behind her when she left court did not slam. It simply clicked shut. And in that small, quiet sound, her fate was sealed. Not in blood, but in distance. While Anne's name would echo through centuries, Mary's would fade softly into the background. Not because she failed, but because she stepped away. And sometimes stepping away is the only way to survive a king. A child's laughter drifts across an open field. It is soft, light, almost ordinary. Far from London, far from the Tower, Mary Boleyn stands at a window and watches her children run through the grass. The sky above them is wide and pale. No guards, no whispers, no polished floors echoing with fear, just wind. Years earlier, she had stood in rooms filled with silk and suspicion. She had known the king's gaze. She had felt the weight of royal attention. But now, the only eyes on her are those of her son and daughter. And yet, a shadow follows her still. Before Anne ever became queen, Mary had drawn Henry VIII's interest. It was not secret for long. The court always watched. The court always talked. Some said she was foolish. Some said she was lucky. But there were two children born during those years. A daughter, Catherine Carey. A son, Henry Carey. And the question never disappeared. Who was their father? Officially, they were the children of Mary's first husband, William Carey. That is what the records say. That is what history writes. But William Carey died young. And the timing made people wonder. Henry VIII had once acknowledged an illegitimate son before. He had given the boy a title. He had not hidden him. So why not these children? Why no royal claim? No quiet support? The silence feels heavy. If the children were truly Henry's, claiming them would have strengthened the Boleyn connection to the throne. But by the time Anne rose high, politics had changed. Pride had deepened, and secrets had grown dangerous. Mary never spoke publicly about it. No letters survive where she confesses. No bold declaration survives where she demands recognition. She stayed quiet. Again, perhaps she understood that silence protected more than truth ever could. Imagine her holding her infant son, looking down at his face, searching for resemblance, a familiar brow, a familiar gaze. Did she see the king? Or did she see only her child? We will never know. But the children grew. They did not grow in palaces. They did not grow under royal banners. They grew in the countryside, away from courtly storms. After Anne's execution, the danger around the Boleyn name intensified. Anyone tied too closely to scandal risked being dragged into it. If Mary's children had been openly linked to Henry, their lives might have been twisted into politics, used as tools, threats, symbols. Instead, they lived quietly. Henry Carey would later serve under Queen Elizabeth, Anne's daughter, a strange twist of fate. The Boleyn bloodline, once cut down at the scaffold, rising again through a different path. But in those early years, none of that was certain. Mary could not see the future. She could only protect what stood in front of her. There is something powerful about a woman choosing to guard her children rather than chase glory. Mary had already seen what ambition could cost. She had watched her sister rise higher than any woman dared to dream and fall with terrifying speed. If her children carried even a drop of royal blood, then that blood was both a gift and a threat. And so she chose silence. Historians still debate. Scholars still argue. Was Henry Carey the king's son? Was Catherine Carey his daughter? The truth sits in the shadows of Tudor politics. But perhaps the deeper truth is not about blood. It is about choice. And Mary did not use her possible connection to the king to climb back into power after Anne's death. She did not wave the possibility like a banner. She did not demand favor. She stepped back further. In a court where lineage meant everything, she allowed her children to remain ordinary. That decision feels almost radical. She had once been near the center of England's most powerful circle. She had once known the king's private attention. And yet, after Anne's fall, she refused to draw attention to herself again. She let history move without her. When we ask what really happened to Mary Boleyn after Anne's death, this is part of the answer. She became a mother, not a rival, not a symbol, not a threat, just a woman raising children in a world that had nearly swallowed her whole. The countryside fields whisper instead of shout. Yeah, the wind carries no accusations, and somewhere between rumor and reality, Mary built a life that did not depend on a king's favor. The question of her children's father remains unsolved. But perhaps Mary knew something more important than history ever will. Sometimes survival is not about proving the truth. Sometimes it is about protecting it. The laughter in the field grows louder. The world beyond the countryside continues its loud, dangerous dance of crowns and betrayal. But here, in the quiet space she chose, Mary Boleyn stands not as a mistress, not as a sister of a fallen queen, not as a forgotten court figure. She stands as a mother who understood the cost of being too close to power. And she chose distance, not because she was weak, but because she had learned. And in Tudor England, the learning too late could mean death. Mary learned just in time. The seasons changed quietly around her. Spring turned to summer. Summer faded into gray autumn skies. The world beyond the countryside never stopped moving. Kings married again. Alliances shifted. New scandals whispered through palace halls. But Mary Boleyn did not return. She grew older, far from London's glittering danger. The girl who once caught a king's eye became a woman shaped by loss. Loss of power, loss of family pride, loss of a sister whose name would never fade. Anne Boleyn became a legend in death. Her story hardened into something dramatic: ambition, betrayal, execution. Visitors would one day walk through the tower and speak her name in hushed voices. Mary's name, however, softened. It slipped between lines in history books, mentioned briefly. It rarely explored. She did not die for love. She did not challenge a king. She did not demand justice. She lived. And in Tudor England, living quietly could be the bravest act of all. After Anne's death, the Boleyn family never fully recovered. Their father faded from influence. Their allies shifted loyalty. The court, once welcoming, became cold. Mary did not fight to restore the family's honor. Perhaps she understood something deeper. The court was never loyal to anyone. It followed power, and power followed Henry. When Henry married again and again, Mary remained in the countryside. She saw his health decline. She heard stories of his temper growing darker, of suspicion becoming habit. She had once known his charm. She had once felt his attention. But she no longer needed it. But there is something almost haunting about that transformation. To move from the center of royal desire to the edge of forgotten land and accept it. Mary died in 1543. No grand ceremony marked her passing. No royal mourning draped in black. No chronicler paused to write long reflections on her life. She was buried quietly. Anne's daughter, Elizabeth, would later rise to become one of England's greatest queens. The Tudor line would continue. The Boleyn blood would survive, not through Anne's crown, but through the quiet threads of family. And Mary would remain a shadow in that story. When we ask what really happened to Mary Boleyn after Anne's death, the answer feels almost simple. She stepped away. She chose love over ambition. She chose motherhood over courtly games. She chose survival over glory. The history often celebrates those who burn brightly. But Mary did something different. She dimmed the flame before it could consume her. Perhaps she watched her sister climb too high and understood the cost. Perhaps she felt the shift in Henry's heart long before others did. Perhaps she saw the danger in royal affection and knew it was not worth the risk. Or perhaps she was simply tired. Tired of whispers. Tired of watching eyes. Tired of living where one wrong step could end everything. The countryside offered no crowns, but it offered safety. In the end, Mary Boleyn did not disappear because she was weak. She disappeared because she chose to. And that choice kept her alive. The story of Anne Boleyn is loud. It echoes with steel and accusation. Mary's story is quiet. It sounds like wind moving through fields, like a door closing softly, like footsteps walking away from danger without turning back. Sometimes history forgets the ones who survive, but survival has its own kind of power. Mary Boleyn was not the queen who fell. She was the sister who learned, and when the storm passed, she was still standing, not crowned, not condemned, just alive. And in Tudor England, that may have been the rarest victory of all. Anne Boleyn died beneath a blade. Mary Boleyn died in silence. One sister became a legend. The other chose to live long enough to be forgotten. But here's the question history leaves us with: was Mary weaker for stepping away? Or was she the only Boleyn who truly understood what it cost to stand too close to Henry VIII?